At a small roadside diner, glowing under the warm afternoon sun, a group of bikers made the fateful mistake of humiliating an elderly black man. It started innocuously, a simple bump, an accidental collision, but quickly escalated. The bikers turned it into a cruel spectacle, mocking him and even spitting into his coffee. What they didn't know was that the man they chose to demean was a decorated Vietnam veteran, a quiet man whose resolve and dignity would soon leave them regretting their actions. The Route 66 diner, bathed in golden light streaming through its large windows, seemed to hold its breath, unaware of the storm brewing inside. Charles "Charlie" Jones, a veteran with weathered hands and a face deeply etched by the lines of time and experience, pushed open the diner's glass door. The soft chime of the bell announced his arrival, and his presence filled the room with a quiet yet commanding air. Charlie's signature cap, adorned with pins and patches commemorating his military service, sat proudly on his head as he paused briefly, letting his eyes adjust to the dim interior. As he moved further in, Charlie stumbled slightly, steadying himself on a nearby chair. In that instant, he found himself face to chest with a mountain of a man. The biker, towering over Charlie, exuded raw menace. His broad shoulders stretched the seams of a worn leather jacket, its back emblazoned with a fierce red dragon, its eyes seemingly alight with fire. The biker's face twisted into a scowl, his glare sharp enough to cut. "Watch where you're walking, old man," the biker growled, his voice low and menacing, like distant thunder promising an oncoming storm. For a moment, time froze. Conversations faltered and died, replaced by the faint sizzle from the kitchen and the ticking clock on the wall. Charlie straightened his posture, years of military discipline evident in the squared set of his shoulders. His instinct was to de-escalate, to offer a polite apology, but the biker's sneer grew more venomous. "Hunchback can't see straight," the man muttered loudly, his words slicing through the diner's silence. "Might as well kiss my boots." The insult hung in the air, sharp and cutting. Charlie's jaw tightened, a muscle twitching in his cheek as he fought to remain composed. His eyes that had seen horrors few could comprehend, locked onto the bikers with unwavering steadiness. For what felt like an eternity, the two men stood frozen in a silent clash of wills, the tension thick enough to choke on. Every patron held their breath, the diner transformed into a powder keg, waiting for a spark to ignite it. But Charlie, drawing on deep reserves of patience and self-control honed through years of hardship and service, chose a different response. Without uttering a word, he stepped aside, his movements deliberate and calm. He felt the biker's looming presence behind him like a thundercloud ready to burst, but he refused to react. Charlie made his way to his usual window booth, each step measured and steady, the tension in the room following him like a shadow. Settling into his familiar seat, Charlie let out a small sigh of relief. His gaze turned to the view outside, a parking lot merging into the endless stretch of Route 66. It was a view he cherished, a quiet reminder of life's vastness and the journeys that converged at this unassuming diner. From the corner of his eye, Charlie saw the biker saunter past his table, throwing him a final glare before slumping into a seat. Charlie didn't acknowledge him. Instead, he focused on the solace of his coffee. And the road ahead, a man steadfast in the face of storms, both past and present. A few tables away, Charlie discreetly observed as two more bikers joined the first. Their leather jackets bore the same fierce red dragon insignia, a symbol that seemed to command both loyalty and intimidation. One of the bikers caught Charlie's gaze and smirked, nudging his companions. Charlie quickly averted his eyes, pretending to study the familiar layout of the diner instead. His gaze drifted to the dessert display case near the counter, where an array of pies and cakes tempted patrons with their sugary allure. He took in the worn but tidy booths, each one holding countless stories of shared meals and quiet conversations. Finally, his eyes settled on his own booth. He had chosen this spot years ago for its strategic vantage point, offering a clear view of both the entrance and the parking lot. It was a habit ingrained from his military days. Always aware of his surroundings, always prepared for the unexpected. The bikers' loud voices carried across the room, their occasional bursts of laughter grating against the diner's normally tranquil atmosphere. Charlie straightened unconsciously, his posture rigid, as if bracing for a confrontation he hoped wouldn't come. The other patrons had resumed their conversations, though their voices were hushed, as if afraid to disturb the fragile peace that hung in the air. Charlie's fingers drummed a slow, contemplative rhythm on the tabletop as he waited for Emily, the young waitress, to appear. Her familiar presence always brought a sense of normalcy to his visits. The sound of approaching footsteps drew his attention, and he looked up to see Emily walking toward him. Her pale blue uniform with a crisp white apron seemed to radiate warmth, her kind eyes and easy smile a welcome counterbalance to the lingering tension in the room. "Good afternoon, Charlie," Emily greeted him cheerfully. Her voice, light and bright, seemed to push back the uneasy atmosphere like sunshine breaking through clouds. "Coffee and grilled cheese, as usual?" Charlie smiled and opened his mouth to respond with his customary yes, but paused as Emily's expression suddenly lit up with excitement. She leaned in, her voice lowering to a playful whisper, her enthusiasm contagious. "Oh, wait," she exclaimed, her tone brimming with pride. "I almost forgot. We have a new special today. Would you like to hear about it?" Intrigued by her energy, Charlie nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Emily's youthful vibrance always reminded him of a time when life felt full of possibilities, a reflection of his own earlier years. "What's the occasion?" he asked, his curiosity piqued. Emily's eyes sparkled as she launched into her explanation, her words tumbling out in an eager rush. "I've been working on perfecting my apple pie recipe for months now," she said, her hands moving animatedly. "I've tried different combinations of apples, adjusted the spices, and even experimented with the crust. And finally, I think I've nailed it." Charlie listened intently, touched by her enthusiasm. Moments like this made the diner feel like a second home, a place where life's small victories were celebrated and shared. Emily leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "I baked a fresh batch this morning, and it's been selling like crazy. In fact," she paused for dramatic effect, her tone teasing, "there's only one uncut piece left." Her mischievous grin widened as she leaned even closer. "Since you're one of our most loyal customers, I'd be happy to give you an extra large slice of that last piece." Charlie chuckled, softly, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "How could I say no to that?" he replied, his voice warm with appreciation. For the first time that afternoon, the storm clouds hovering over his mind began to lift, replaced by the simple joy of connection and good food. "What do you say, Charlie? Want to try something new today?" Emily asked, her hopeful tone breaking the lingering tension in the air. Charlie's eyes flicked toward the dessert case, where he could just make out the golden brown crust of the remaining slice of pie. He was a creature of habit, his usual grilled cheese sandwich a reliable constant in an often chaotic and unpredictable world. But as he looked back at Emily's eager face, he felt a warmth in his chest. This young woman had poured her heart into creating something special, and she wanted to share it with him. In that moment, Charlie realized that stepping outside his comfort zone could sometimes lead to unexpected joys. "You know what, Emily," he said, his voice warm with affection. "I think I'll give that apple pie a try." Emily's face lit up with a smile, so bright it seemed to chase away the shadows in the diner. "Wonderful," she exclaimed, her excitement barely contained. "I'll bring your coffee right away, and then I'll slice up that pie for you. You won't regret it, Charlie, I promise." As Emily turned to head back to the counter, her steps light with happiness, Charlie's gaze drifted toward the biker's table. The three men were now eyeing the dessert shelf hungrily, their earlier aggression seemingly replaced by their interest in the last piece of pie. Emily approached their table, maintaining her professional smile despite the tension. "What can I get for you gentlemen today?" she asked, her voice friendly but firm. The largest biker, Tank, leaned forward, his gruff voice carrying across the diner. "We'll take that last piece of apple pie," he demanded impatiently. Emily's smile faltered for just a moment before she regained her composure. "I'm sorry, sir, but But that piece has already been sold to another customer, she replied. We do have a fresh batch baking in the kitchen. It should be ready in about 30 minutes if you'd like to wait. The biker's face darkened. We don't want to wait 30 minutes. Let the other customer wait for the new one. Emily stood her ground, her voice steady. I'm sorry, but it's our policy to serve on a first-come, first-served basis. It wouldn't be fair to give away an order that's already been placed. The tension thickened as the bikers exchanged glances. Razor, another biker with a name stitched across his vest, leaned forward, his voice low and threatening. Look, sweetheart, that's a big piece of pie. You could split it. Half for us, half for your regular customer. His eyes flicked toward Charlie's table, making it clear he knew exactly who had ordered the pie. Emily's gaze followed Razor's, her concern evident as she glanced at Charlie. She hesitated, but quickly composed herself. I'm sorry, gentlemen, but I can't do that. The pie has been reserved for one of our regulars. Perhaps I could interest you in another dessert while you wait for the fresh batch. The bikers' displeasure was clear in their scowls and restless shifting. After a tense pause, Razor finally relented, though his voice dripped with frustration. Fine, just bring us some coffee for now. We'll wait for the new pie. Emily nodded, hurrying to fetch their order. Charlie couldn't help but notice the way the biker's eyes followed her, their gazes a mix of frustration and something darker. He had a sinking feeling that this situation was far from over. As Emily returned to Charlie's table with his coffee, her smile was strained but genuine. Here's your coffee, Charlie, she said, setting the mug down gently. I'll bring out your apple pie in just a second. Before Charlie could respond, a shadow fell across his table. Looking up, he found himself face to face with the three bikers, Razor, Tank, and Billy, their names now visible on their vests. They loomed over him, a wall of leather and aggression. Well, Razor sneered, his tone dripping with contempt. Looks like we've got ourselves a greedy old-timer here. Ordering such a big piece of pie all for yourself? Charlie remained silent, his hand steady as he reached for his coffee mug. He had faced far worse threats in his life and wasn't about to be intimidated by these bullies. Tank, the largest of the trio, leaned in closer, his breath hot against Charlie's face. Remember me, old man? You bumped into me earlier. Can't even see straight. Can you? Are you sure you can finish that whole piece of pie? You'll just get diabetic, and those eyes of yours will roll right out of their sockets. Cruel laughter echoed through the nearly empty diner. The few remaining customers had quietly slipped out, leaving Charlie increasingly isolated. Despite the mockery, Charlie's voice was calm and firm as he addressed them. Gentlemen, I suggest you back off. You won't be getting a single spoonful of my pie. His words ignited a fresh wave of hostility. Razor's face twisted with anger as he reached for Charlie's coffee cup. In a show of dominance, Razor grabbed Charlie's coffee mug, took a deliberate sip, and then spat the liquid back into the mug. Leaning in close, his sneer deepened. Listen here, you washed-up old-timer, he growled. We can make things very unpleasant for you if you don't cooperate. Charlie's composure remained unshaken. His eyes locked on Razor's, calm yet resolute. I've fought much worse battles than this, he said in a low, steady voice. You shouldn't try to mess with me. Billy, who had been silent until then, suddenly noticed Charlie's veteran cap. A cruel smile spread across his face. Oh, look at this, he sneered. We've got ourselves a hero. Tell me, old man, how does it feel to be a washed-up vet whose service doesn't mean anything anymore? The insult was designed to cut deep, but Charlie's expression remained impassive. He'd heard far worse in his lifetime, and these punks were nothing compared to the horrors he had faced during the war. Tank, emboldened by Billy's jabs, decided to add his own cruelty. Hey, wait a minute, he said, his eyes narrowing as he looked Charlie up and down. How do we even know you're a real soldier? I mean, look at your skin color. Are you sure you're not just some imposter trying to get respect you don't deserve? The racial undertone of Tank's words hung heavily in the air, staining the already tense atmosphere with a new layer of ugliness. Charlie's jaw tightened, but he refused to give them the satisfaction of reacting to their bigotry. Razor leaned in closer, his voice a menacing whisper. Here's how it's going to go, old-timer. Either we get a taste of that apple pie, or we make sure you don't have it either. Your choice." Their laughter echoed through the diner as Emily watched helplessly from behind the counter, the plate of apple pie trembling in her hands like a fragile shield. The confrontation had escalated far beyond dessert, and Charlie found himself at the center of a storm of hatred and intimidation. Yet, a quiet determination settled over him. He'd faced worse odds before, and he wasn't about to back down now. Emily's indecision was evident as her eyes darted between Charlie and the menacing figures of the bikers. Razor, sensing her hesitation, turned his attention to her. With slow, deliberate steps, he approached the counter, his eyes fixed on the plate in her hands. "Hand it over, sweetheart," he demanded, his voice a low growl that sent shivers down Emily's spine. Emily's gaze met Charlie's across the diner. Her eyes were filled with apology as she reluctantly handed over the plate. She knew she was powerless to stop what was coming, but the guilt weighed heavily on her. Razor returned to Charlie's table with exaggerated triumph, holding the pie aloft like a trophy. With a chilling smirk, he dipped his spoon into the golden crust, breaking through to the warm, cinnamon-scented filling. "Well, old-timer," Razor sneered. "Looks like you'll be serving us after all, just like you used to serve the country, right? How about you feed each of us a bite, nice and slow?" The mockery of Charlie's service and sacrifice hung in the air. The bikers' laughter rang harshly against the tense silence that enveloped the diner. Just when the situation seemed ready to spiral further, the sound of heavy footsteps drew everyone's attention. Emily had returned, this time accompanied by her father, Brian, the diner's owner. A tall, broad-shouldered man, Brian's presence immediately shifted the energy in the room. His voice cut through the tension like a knife. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, his tone making it clear he knew it wasn't. His sharp gaze swept over the scene, taking in the bikers' aggressive postures and Charlie's calm demeanor. Turning to the bikers, Brian's voice hardened. "I think it's time for you gentlemen to return to your own table, unless you'd like me to make sure your bikes can't park here again." The veiled threat rippled through the bikers, causing a flicker of unease. They exchanged glances, clearly weighing their options. Charlie, ever the peacemaker, intervened. "It's all right, Brian," he said, his tone calm yet firm. "I have the situation under control. You and Emily shouldn't worry. Yourselves." Charlie's words, meant to diffuse the tension, only seemed to ignite Razor's fury. As Billy and Tank reluctantly retreated to their table, Razor leaned in close to Brian. "You'll regret this, old man," he whispered, his voice laced with menace. "There will be consequences for your actions." The threat hung ominously in the air as Razor joined his companions, leaving Charlie alone once more. Despite the bikers' retreat, the sense of unease lingered, a shadow over the diner that no amount of sunshine streaming through the windows could dispel.